Well, good to be with you all today. I've got my Ihry insurance hat with me, so great to be with you all virtually. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but we certainly have a lot to discuss here for 2026, and we'll dig right into it. If any of you are not getting the stuff we put out at NAU on marketing, we encourage you to sign up. I do the opening bell phone call every morning. We have an email letter in the afternoon. So if you're not getting one or both of those, let us know. We also have several different webinars and videos that we do throughout the month, and those can be found on our YouTube channel. If you go out and type in NAU Country, you can watch those at any time. So a lot of different ways we try to get information out to the folks that we're working with. So my role with the company has always been on the grain marketing side, but also how that pieces together with government programs and crop insurance. And so we'll look at a little bit of each of those here this morning and start out with the marketing side of the puzzle. And a couple of big pieces of news in the last week or so. Number one was at the end of last week, we had the Ag Outlook Forum convened in Washington, D.C. They put out their initial 2026 estimates for acres and everything else. But you can see on the far right, these are their acreage estimates for this coming year. They don't expect much of a change in wheat acres, but they do expect to see a flip from corn to soybean acres this year. So we'll see how it eventually pans out. We will get a planning intentions report at the end of March. But for the moment, the trade, I think, in agreement that we're probably going to see a few less corn acres and a few less soybean acres than what we planted last year. Another big piece of news the last week or so, the Supreme Court striking down the global tariffs. Not quite sure what that means for our crops, especially. I think the soybean market was a little itchy when that news first hit. I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, and I think the trade's trying to figure that out right now as well. But it certainly does add some volatility to all of the markets. And so I do want to start out looking at soybeans. Soybeans are probably the biggest mover here over the last several months. And a couple of weeks ago, we were last to news when President Trump tweeted that China could buy maybe as many as 8 million more tons of U.S. soybeans this year. Now, we haven't seen any of that take place yet, and he is going to visit China here late March, early April. But this is a picture of the deal that we've got with China this year. You go back to last fall, Secretary Bessent reported that China was going to buy 12 million tons of U.S. beans this year, 25 million each of the next 3 years. And those are represented in the dark green here on the screen. President Trump's latest 8 million would be the light green if it happens. Now, I'm not going to bet the farm that it will, but we'll see what eventually happens there. A couple of things point here. Last few. Not a shock. Most of us had expected that to continue to be the case because China is going to continue to buy more and more of its supplies out of Brazil as their acreage continue to run. So we'll see if that what happens. But so the fact that we're able to ship them at least 12 million this year, but in even more impressive, the 25 million. I think that would be a big deal for soybeans going forward. I'm not willing to bet the farm just yet, but I think 25 million tons would be a heck of a deal each of the next 3 years if it does happen. Now, if we're able to ship them any beans nearby, it is not going to be because of price. When you look at the price comparison right now between the United States and red versus Argentina and Brazil, our beans are a lot more expensive. So there's really no incentive for anybody to buy U.S. beans at the moment. So if they do, it's going to be because of a deal getting done, basically us kind of forcing them to buy or trading that off for something else. So we'll see what happens, and especially here when we get to about the 1st of April. But so far this year, the lack of bean sales throughout the harvest. Yes.
I'm going to stop you just 1 second here.
Yeah,
you're kind of out a little bit. So we're only getting every few words from you.
Maybe if I talk quieter.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you bet. So our sales so far, our shipments so far year to date have really been struggling. And I think it's been because we just didn't have any bean sales to China through the harvest window. And if you look at the shipments, this October to January, February window is usually our biggest window of the year for shipping beans, and the fact that we didn't have China on the books really set us back. Now, we do have sales to ship now. The problem is that we're also loading a lot of corn at the moment and some wheat. And so you can see last week was a very disappointing week for soybeans. We anticipated that we would have pretty decent numbers on out through March, April because of some of these late sales. So that's going to be something we watch pretty closely over the next couple of weeks, see if this is an aberration. But if it's not, that could mean that the bean market's probably now, that's negative. The positive so far this year has been the domestic crush. We've had a lot of new plants coming online in 25, 26. There's several more coming online. We're setting new records every month. And so that's the positive. Now, it's not going to replace what we've given up in export business this year, but certainly the domestic crush is needed going forward. And so if you look at the balance sheet on soybeans in the blue column, second to the right, that's this year's marketing year. And production, the final number was out back in January at a little over 4.2 billion bushels. We've got a total supply of beans at 4.6 billion. The crush we mentioned a second ago at a record this year, but the exports are projected to be down about 300 million bushels. So we'll see if that number eventually changes or not. But as we sit here today, ending stocks at 350 million bushels, big number. So the trade may not be believing that at the moment, but we'll have to see going forward. Average farm price, the government says 10.20. Keep that number in mind when we talk about potential PLC or ARC payments. They use this price, but the marketing year runs through August 31st. So we're still only about halfway through the year. Now, for next year, for 26, the column on the far right, these are the numbers that USDA put out in its baseline numbers a week ago. 85 million bean acres. They're projecting a yield next year right now at 53 bushel, which would add a couple hundred million in supply. But they are bullish that demand will basically eat that up. And at the end of the year, we'll still be around 350 million bushels of beans. So average farm price, they don't expect much of a change in the year ahead. So now that the U.S., a lot of the focus today is on Brazil. How big is that crop going to be? And right now, USDA forecasting a record 180 million tons. Argentina in blue expected to be down slightly. But if you add the U.S. and red in, all three countries together would have a record so we know we're probably dealing with a lot of supply. Brazil is well into harvest. 30% of their crop is harvested as of last weekend. So a little bit behind last year. They were slow about a week ago because of too much rain. So that did set them back a little bit. But this past week, they've picked up the pace again. Second crop corn. One thing to remember that 75% of the Brazilian corn crop gets planted following soybeans. And it's running a little bit late as well, but that's important to get the crop in as early as possible. I saw these on Twitter a couple of days ago talking about the truck line going up to the river. And Karen Braun had shared this 28-kilometer line of trucks on the highway going to the river. And my first thought back about that is what are basis levels doing in Brazil? They have to be just dirt cheap right now if you've got that many beans hitting the market. So again, there's no reason China would buy our beans based on price right now. It would have to be based on the fact that we have a deal struck with them. And I thought this was interesting as well. You look at the state of Mato Grosso overlaid in the United States, basically eats up a huge chunk of the United States Corn Belt. Now, their concentration of acres isn't as big as ours, but certainly it's a big area, and it does matter a lot. Now, looking at weather over the next 14 days, this is about a day or two old. The Brazilian area is expected to be fairly wet over the next 2 weeks. So that could slow the harvest down a little bit, could slow planting of the second corn crop. Also of concern would be down here into Argentina and southern Brazil, where it's been dry and expected to stay dry over the next couple of weeks. So we'll watch that. But that's certainly a concern, I think, as we go forward. So here's a snapshot of what the funds have done in soybeans. It's been a roller coaster ride over the last few months, and most of that's been driven by what's happened with China, whether it's the actual sale that was made or whether it was the tweet that he made last 2 weeks ago. But you can see, you go through the last growing season, these funds were basically about even beans most of the year. Then we got into October, and when the deal was announced, all of a sudden the funds went crazy buying soybeans, bought their net position to over 200,000 contracts long, and we know what the bean market did. Then they turned around and sold it all back, and I think part of that was because of the slow pace of actually making the sales. It took a long time for those sales to get announced, and the traders started getting a little nervous that it wasn't going to happen. Then you fast forward to early February, President Trump made the tweet again about China maybe buying more beans, and now the funds have been very active buyers once again. And this is important because when you look at the chart on March soybeans, it's really followed what the funds have done. We were kind of hanging in the low tens back in October when they started their buying run, ran the market $1.40 higher. Then they sold it back off, took us back down to the trend line. Now, over the last month, they've been net buyers and taking us up over $1 a bushel. One other market, well, I'll hit on it in a minute, but is soybean oil has kind of been leading the way as well in beans, and it's been running pretty hard. But I would point out at the bottom of the chart, the RSI right now, as of last night, we're running right at 70. So the stochastics in the upper 80s. That usually means this market's pretty toppy and probably due for a correction. So today's going to be important if we can hold above the 9-day moving average, the red line at the close. If we don't, I would think we could see some correction in the bean market. I've been a big proponent of selling beans on the last rally, on this rally. Anything above 11 futures, I think has been a pretty good sale this year. And I still think, given the fact that Brazil's harvesting a record crop, we don't know what's going to happen with China. Our beans are priced way above Brazilian beans right now, and we're talking more acres this spring. I think I would like to cash my beans in and give them to somebody else. Now, looking ahead to new crop, kind of the same way here. You look at the indicators at the bottom of the chart, pretty overbought right now. And we've got our insurance price up to 11.05 as of last night, but we're trading above that. I think it's a good place to be hedging some new crop soybeans if you haven't started yet. And we'll talk about PLC in a little bit, but we're well above, about 50 cents above the PLC trigger price for next year. So, we don't really have the support at the market from that program. That's why I like getting beans priced at this level. And so how many, that's up to you, but I think it's a good place to be getting a good start. Switching over to corn, the biggest story in the corn market this year was the January crop report, where USDA found a bunch of new harvested acres, and it really took the market by surprise. Within the next couple of days after that, we figured out why. They said that it was because we cut many less acres for silage this year, that the silage yields were so good that we needed less acres for silage. Therefore, we had more harvested acres for corn, grain. And so you can see on this map where those added acres came in. North Dakota, we added 140,000 acres. South Dakota, 240, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, a lot of new acres. So at the end, we added over 1 million acres to the bottom line. So not only did USDA tell us we had a record yield this year, but we also had this huge acreage number to deal with, and it added 300 to 400 million in production. So that's been the negative all year, the size of the corn crop. Now, the positive has been that we're building demand, and you can see exports at a record high, 3.3 billion bushels of corn this year. Last year was a record. This year we're going to top it by 500 million bushels. So some people think we're on pace to even see that number get bigger. And if you look at our export loadings, the first part of the marketing year, we were setting records every week. We've backed off to a more normal pattern here lately, but it's been still impressive given the fact that we've now got bean boats to load. And so I do think the corn numbers are going to hang in here. I think the export elevators are going to be busy as heck over the next 90 days, not only loading corn, but beans as well. So that's been a big, big positive for the corn market. Now, it's maybe not been able to eat through all of that extra production. You can see USDA told us our production was over 17 billion bushels, topped the previous record by 1.7 billion. So just a huge, huge number. And that's tough to work through. Now, if you look at the demand side, we're going to have a record this year. Feed demand right now at a record, 6.2 billion. I'm not sure I believe it, but the government continues to stand by it. The ethanol at 5.6 billion is a record, and exports at a record. So total demand at nearly 16.5 billion bushels, pretty big deal. But ending stock still forecasted over 2.1 billion. So that still lingers out there. Average farm price at 410. Again, that'll be used for PLC or ARC payments at the end of the year. Looking ahead, USDA tells us they think we're going to plant 4 to 5 million less acres. They're using a 183 yield next year, so production would drop back over a billion, about 1.3 billion. There's still bullish demand, maybe not quite as big, but ending stocks down to 1.837 billion. I think this early, that's somewhat favorable to the corn market. That's my personal opinion because I really think this demand is kind of inelastic at this point. I don't really see it changing a lot, maybe 100, 200 million, but the ethanol numbers kind of stagnant, but at a record level. Feed demand, I think it kind of solid right now. Exports, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but the world, if it needs corn, it kind of has to come to the United States. So I think it's really going to boil down to production. How many acres do we plant this spring? And of course, then what's the growing season look like? So I mentioned a second ago, if you want to be bullish, it's the world numbers, because you look at the U.S. stocks to usage at 13%, that's the highest we've been in 7 years. So that is not bullish. But if you look at the world numbers, 19.2% is the lowest we've been since 2013. And that's because we've had several countries that produce corn have had shorter crops, but also because of demand rising, especially in a country like Brazil, where they are really pushing the ethanol program right now like we did 20 years ago. And so they're using all their additional corn production. They're even buying corn out of Argentina. And so the world needs corn. It has to come to the U.S. And so if somebody else has a problem around the world, maybe it's China, maybe it's Brazil, who knows? But if somebody does, then I think that adds even more demand to the United States. And this was a story that Reuters had shared here a couple of weeks ago. And I thought maybe it would get some more traction to the corn market, but it didn't. But China was buying U.S. sorghum, Australian barley. They noted tighter corn supplies in China. Chinese corn futures had rallied to a contract high back on February 13th. So there's some positive stuff building out here at the world. Maybe it hasn't been able to tip the U.S. balance sheet this year, but next year with less acres possibly could be a factor. So something to think about. Now, here's where the funds are at in corn. They're been short most of this year, and it's made a lot of sense given the size of the crop and the size of the carryout that we've been projecting. But they've quietly bought some of that back in over the last few weeks to the point where they're only short less than 50,000 contracts, about 30,000 contracts as of last Friday. So I still think this is a potential positive, that if something changes bullish, they've got something to buy to get back to zero, and even if they want to get on the long side of the market. And if you look at the March futures chart, things were going pretty well at the end of the year. We had made our contract low back in August prior to harvest, and then despite the record crop, it was impressive to see the market push higher all the way through fall. We fell into the normal sideways range November, December, early January, and then we had the January crop report day where we basically took the 15-cent range that we'd been trading in and dropped it 15 cents. So where this triple bottom low now became resistance on the top side. And for the moment, we're sitting in this 420 to 435 range. We are heading into the first notice day for the March futures contract this Friday. Oftentimes you see March corn trade lower into that window, especially when we've got big corn stocks like we do this year. The indicators at the bottom, pretty neutral right at the moment. But I would think, I saw another chart this week that talked about basis contracts on corn being at one of the highest years that we've seen. So as you're going into Friday, if you've got a basis contract, you either got to price it or roll it, and neither of those would be friendly to March corn. So I think the best we could hope for going into Friday is a sideways trade, get into the March deliveries, and then maybe March, April, May, you've got some potential upside for the corn market. And if you do, I'm still somewhat optimistic that maybe we push back up to this 450 area. Maybe it'll have to be the May contract. I am concerned about the corn market heading into summer because if we don't get a weather rally or some sort of a big rally between now and July, I think you're going to have a lot of corn hitting the market in July and August like we did 2 years ago. So something to keep in the back of your mind that, if we start dragging this thing out into late May, June, and we haven't had anything to trade on, I would be concerned and maybe start to look to get rid of remaining corn. Looking at new crop now, a different story here. Old crop supplies are very burdensome at the moment. New crop, we're talking fewer acres. So I think this March December spread's going to continue to widen, either March dropping or December going up. Probably more of the former than the latter, but we've pushed back up into the 460s. Insurance price averaging 460 right now. Indicators a little more positive on December than they were on the March contract. I'm still not wanting to be much of a seller here, though. Unlike soybeans, the corn market is basically at the PLC reference price right now on a cash basis for next year. So I don't see a reason why I want to get excited forward selling basically where the government is providing me support. We'll talk about PLC in a minute, but if we get to 480 and above, I do think I'd want to be a seller of December new crop corn. Below that, I at least this early in the year, probably not. Now, if you get out to June and we're still trading 465 December corn, yeah, then I'd probably want to be locking some in. So a few other markets to look at. This is a snapshot of the overall fund position in grains and oil seeds, which includes all of the wheat markets. Funds have actually gone back to the long side net. They've bought back a chunk of their short position in wheat, bought back some of their corn. So you can see what they've done with their net position back to the upside. Looking at mini spring wheat, it's just been a struggle. We've made a new contract low back here late January. We have trended a little higher lately, and I think that funds buying back some of their major short position that they've had in wheat. Now, they haven't really shown a reason they want to go long, but at least it's gotten this market up off the floor. Still not a level I want to get excited about forward selling. Just down here, in the 630s, you got the RSI basically at neutral here this morning. Looking at the bean oil market, I mentioned a minute ago, bean oil, I think, has been a lifter of soybeans. Part of this has been because we signed a trade deal with India a couple of weeks ago, and India agreed to buy U.S. bean oil. And now you've taken bean oil on the nearby chart, the highest level it's been since 23. Now, it is very overbought. Even on the weekly chart, you've got stochastics up into the 90s, the RSI at 72. I did see here this morning bean oil was down about 50 cents, which is a significant move for one day. So be concerned if you're long beans that bean oil, if it turns lower, could pull beans back with it. And look at the fund position in bean oil. It's been a heck of a run. They were short about 70,000 contracts early winter. Now they're long about 30,000 contracts. So been a heck of a run, and we'll see what the funds decide to do from here. The cattle market, we've had a couple of huge runs in the cattle over the last few months. We made a record high back in October. The funds basically liquidated their length and took us back down under $300. Now we had funds building back their length again as we continue to get bullish placement numbers. But this market was really, I think overbought once again. And now we've dipped back below the 9 and the 20-day moving average. So watch this market closely. But I do think this is where the LRP insurance policy makes a lot of sense. If you want a price put that's subsidized by the government, LRP kind of gives you that. The oil market. We haven't talked much about crude over the last year because it's been generally in a downslide, but over the last 60 days, we've had a pretty good rally. We've gone from basically $55 to $67. I think the threat of war with Iran certainly a driver here, but oil tends to be one of the markets that corn and soybeans tend to follow once in a while. So if you were able to sustain much upside in the oil market, certainly I think that could be something to help the grain markets as well. But the last chart I show you is the Sachs index, and this index is made up of all commodities, not just stock. It's petroleum, oil. It is the precious metals markets all lumped in here, and we've had a nice little run in the index over the last since the beginning of the year. And I've used the phrase more than once that a rising tide lifts all boats, and I think you're seeing that a little bit in some of these commodity markets, and I think that's why the funds have bought back some of their short position, especially in corn and in wheat recently. So I just throw this out there that, one thing that could be potentially friendly is if you have fund traders that decide they want to get into commodities, but maybe they don't want to price gold at $5,000 an ounce or buy oil at $70, they might be looking at some of the underpriced commodities like wheat and corn. So something that might give us a little boost. If you're looking for optimism, that might be a reason. So shifting gears to the government program side of things, 2025 was probably the most active year we've ever seen in government programs. A lot of different disaster relief programs out. Farm Bureau shared the chart here, $42 billion in economic assistance for producers last year. It started with the of 10 billion. In addition, we had a couple billion for specialty crops, a couple billion for livestock. Accounted for a little over $5 billion. Currently, you can sign up for phase two. If you had a yield loss in 23 or 24, you would qualify potentially for a payment there in phase two. So I would encourage apply. Doesn't cost anything to apply. Maybe you would qualify for a payment. The latest is the Farmer Bridge Assistance Program. That's another $11 billion. These were the payment amounts that were announced at the end of the year. And so you can see the numbers. These are based on your certified acres in 2025. I've been told this week there's various ways to apply for this payment, but the application process started Monday morning. If you go to the FSA office, they can pull up your application. You can check the numbers, make sure that you agree, sign it, give it to them, and that'll get your name in for payments. And dollars are supposed to start going out next week. So every FSA office is probably going to be a little different, but you certainly, if you haven't applied yet, you might want to give them a call or stop by and see about doing that. The One Big Beautiful Bill was signed into law on July the 4th. It had numerous changes in here for crop producers that never would have gotten done in a standalone farm bill. But this was a separate spending bill, and the farm organizations figured out that we could attach Title I and Title 11 changes into this Big Beautiful Bill, since those are technically spending parts of the farm bill. Title I is the FSA programs, and Title 11 is the crop insurance program. And so we'll show you these numbers in a minute, but we had some very positive changes for the PLC program, which is price loss. The county ARC program bumped its trigger to 90%. For 2025, since these programs changes were done after you enrolled last year, the government's going to give you the higher of. Whether PLC or ARC pays the most money this year, you're going to get the higher of. So that's a big deal. For 26, we will have to make a choice once again. We'll talk about that in a second. We are going to see some new base acres added around the country this year. I still don't know the formula for that yet. Everybody that added ground over the last several years may be able to get some base, maybe not all of those acres, but it is important because PLC and ARC pay on percentages of base acres, not on planted acres. Your per entity payment limit is going to go up $30,000. For crop insurance in the yellow, three big changes beginning farmers and ranchers. Those benefits are going to expand for 5 to 10 years. The SCO, ECO, and MCO. These are all the county-based coverages that stack above your individual level. That subsidy rate was bumped to 80% this year. That's absolutely huge. 2 years ago, ECO was 44%. So your premium support has doubled in 2 years. In addition, the individual policies all saw a 3 to 5% increase as well in their subsidy rate. So big deal. Also, crop insurance and FSA programs now totally separate. In the past, if you signed up for the county ARC program, you were not allowed to buy SCO. Now you can do whatever you want on crop insurance, do whatever you want at the FSA office. So big deal there as well. So here are the new prices under the big beautiful bill. The PLC statutory reference prices in the dark blue box, every crop in the United States saw a bump. Corn went from 370 to 410. Soybeans went from 840 to $10. Wheat went up 90 cents. Everything we grow in the country saw a bump. So the way PLC works is if the market your average price falls below the reference price, you get paid the difference times your payment yield at the FSA office times 85% of your base acres. The other alternative to PLC is county ARC, and ARC is using the numbers in the dark red box. Those were the same. Those are 5-year Olympic average prices, so they didn't change under the big beautiful bill. We just took the last 5 years, threw out the high and the low, and averaged the other 3. Last year, that was pretty favorable for the ARC program because of how high these numbers were. But last year, we took them times 86%. The big beautiful bill now takes it times 90%. So that gives you the numbers in the bright red box. And then you multiply it by your county's 5-year Olympic average yield to determine your county revenue trigger. Then at the end of the year, if the final yield times the final market year average price ends up below the trigger, you get paid the difference on 85% of your base acres. So one's revenue, one's price. Now, the other change for PLC came when they changed this percentage for the effective reference price. Now, 88% of the ARC benchmark. So that would give you 442 for corn, 1071 for beans, sorghum 467. All the other crops would not be bigger than the statutory price. So you get the higher of these two in the blue boxes. So for corn this year, we know that we have a price support at 442, soybeans at 1071, wheat at 635. That's on 85% of your base acres. Well, the numbers over here in the gray box with the blue line, those are the current estimates from USDA for the market year average price. Every crop we grow in the United States right now has a price below the PLC trigger price. So if the marketing year ended now, we would all be getting PLC money. Some might get ARC payments depending on what your county yield did, because prices are down from these ARC prices as well. So we'll have to do the math at the end of the year, pick the higher of the two. But the one you can count easily is the PLC. And as of today, if you had corn base acres, you'd be getting 32 cents a bushel times your payment yield times 85% of those base acres. Soybeans would pay you 51 cents. Wheat would pay $1.45 if the marketing year ended now. Now, the marketing year goes through August 31st, and these payments don't get made until sometime in October. So don't go spending the money yet. These numbers can change and likely will change a little bit between now and August 31st. But as of today, we've got some pretty good price support, it looks like, from PLC. Now, for 26, when we make this election, this was a comment that the Deputy Ag Secretary made about a month ago in a speech. He said that producers should know their 26 production and yields before they have to make this election this year. And went on to say that their FSA offices are going to be so swamped that they don't have time this spring to deal with ARC and PLC. So this is a pretty good deal. You're going to get to wait until sometime later in the year to make the election for next year. So if you think your county yields are down, then the ARC program would look better. If the county yields are good, it looks like, then maybe, but prices are down, then maybe PLC makes more sense. So we'll talk about this more in the months ahead. But one thing to know for 2026 is the prices stay the same for one more year. The ARC benchmark does not change, which means this PLC effective price does not change. And as of right now, the ones in the gray, these are the ones that USDA is projecting for 26, 27. And every crop would still be low enough to trigger a PLC payment. But this is part of the reason why on corn, we're trading futures in the 460s right now. If you subtract a national average basis, probably 25 under the board, that's below the PLC effective reference price. So So to me, you've got support here as long as you've got corn-based acres. Soybeans, we're trading 50 plus cents above that number now. So more likely to want to go forward and sell beans given where the market's at today. Wheat, the market's pretty low right at the moment. So I think we've got good support. Really don't need to go out and market today. So this is kind of how I, utilize these programs and how they fit together with the marketing here for 2026. And then finishing up with crop insurance, as we think about 2026, we've got 3 days left in the year to set the averages. You can see at the bottom where those are running. Corn 460, barley 419, soybeans 1105. You can see the oils, spring wheat at 617, running lower than last year. So we'll see where we are at the end of the month, but not big changes from last year. Soybeans are up about 50 cents. That's probably the big one. But as I think about crop insurance for this year, I'm a pretty visual person, and I looked at put together this menu essentially to discuss crop insurance. And to me, it's kind of like going to a restaurant this year. Two things to me are making the insurance easier than ever, maybe. And number one are the added subsidies to the program that's going to make it a lot cheaper. But number two, the fact that it's been totally separated from the FSA decision. So now you can do whatever you want on crop insurance. And so to me, as I sit down at dinner at a restaurant and I grab the menu, the first thing I look at is the meat. That's the main course. And to me, your revenue protection is always going to be the main course of your crop insurance decision. How much individual coverage do I need on my farm? What makes the most sense for me? And you can see the subsidy rates down here below. We saw a bit of a bump. Anything 75 and down saw a 5% bump up to 80%. The higher level saw a 3% bump. So you can make the decision, does 75 make the most sense? Do I need to go up to 80, possibly 85 if I have risky ground, or I need to want to make sure I have enough dollars guaranteed for my lender? Maybe, that's the first decision. The second decision then, I call that my side dish. That's your baked potato, your mac and cheese, whatever the case is. But to me, that's that next level. That's the SCO, which is supplemental coverage. And supplemental coverage covers from 86% down to where your individual policy leaves off. So if I buy 75% RP, and then add the SCO, it would be 11% of county coverage stacked on top of my individual protection. SCO's pretty cheap, relatively speaking, because it's subsidized at 80%, but you're not up at that top end just yet. But this is a way to get more dollars added to your bottom line. The top of this, the dessert, that's your ECO. And that gets me the most potential dollars of protection I can get, gets me up to 95%. I mentioned earlier, 2 years ago, the subsidy rate was 44 on this. Now the government bumped it up to 80%. They're trying their hardest to get producers to get up to 95% coverage so they don't have to make economic disaster payments going forward. So that seems to be the mission that they're on, but they're really making it a lot more palatable to get up to that higher level. So these are the decisions for every crop you've got this year. Basically you got three decisions. What level of RP do I need? Do I add the SCO? And then do I add the ECO to get the most possible dollars I can get this year? And we've got some tools to be able to show you how these work, but I've continued to look at ECO like a put option. And so here's an example, kind of walking through the math. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but if I were to buy 15% of county coverage between SCO and ECO, starting with an 80% RP policy, and let's say that this year we start out at $4.60 base price, but go to $4 in the fall. You have a pretty good crop, market goes down. Well, the value of that band, that 15% band, is the higher of the base price times your APH on your farm. So in this example, somewhere over $140 an acre. But if I go into the year assuming that my county yield is going to be the same, and I just used a generic number here, but it doesn't matter what your number. If you assume that you're going to have an average crop, but the price is going to go down like it has this past year. We went from 470 to 422. In this example here, we end up making 97% of our expected revenue in the county, which happens to be below my trigger at 95. So in this example, we're going to get paid, and if we do the math, it comes out to $77 an acre. But if I'm only buying individual coverage, let's say at 75 or 80%, or even buying SCO up to 86, none of those are higher in this example to trigger any kind of payment dollars. And this is to me how ECO works like a put option. Now, this is going to change a little bit when the county yield comes in at the end of the year, but I know starting out that if I'm fearful of prices going down, maybe I am on corn eventually, maybe I am on soybeans, especially this year, then the ECO and the SEO can work for you. So to put it all together, this kind of goes back to the menu a minute ago, but this is something that I showed in our aftermath here a couple of weeks ago. The first thing you have to decide on is your revenue protection. What level makes the most sense? The second thing then is the SCO. Do I want that next band of protection up to 86? The third thing then is the ECO. Do I add that 9% band? And on corn, 95% of the base price starts at about 437, goes down at 9% is 437 to 396 if you assume an average of flat county yield in the year. So that's all good, but I still don't have a way to protect corn price down to 437. And if I think that that's needed, then this is an option spread that I suggested in our aftermath here a week or so ago. And today you can buy a 465 put option for 30 cents a bushel. By itself, it would give you a floor at 435. Well, that's not very attractive because ECO can do that. But if I sell the put 435 put, collect 15 cents. Now I've got a band, essentially a put spread from 465 to 435. It's going to net cost me 15 cents. But to pay for that, I'm willing to go sell a 5/10 December call option for 15 cents today. And if I do all three of those things, the net cost of this trade is zero. So as the market trades down, if we were to go lower, let's say we go below 435, we're going to max out the put spread with a gain of 30 cents. But we also likely will start to trigger an ECO payment, and we have the PLC program providing support as well, starting at 442 cash price down. What if we trade above 510? Well, if you do that, you would have a short hedge at 510. I think today we would all take that. However, if corn goes to $6, then you're on the hook for some margin money. And so that is the weak link, I guess, if you will, in this trade, or the thing that people have to understand is you have the risk is if the market goes substantially higher. If it does, though, and you have a loss on your farm, then your revenue insurance is going to pay you at a higher fall price. So you do have some protection that way as well. But the bottom line is with margins tight, this 30 cents from 465 to 435 could be profit margin in some cases. And if you can't lock it in any other way and you don't want to go to the market and just sell today, this would be a way to do that. So this is kind of how we wrap it all together with marketing, with ECO, with the PLC program, how all of this kind of fits together in my mind. And that's why I wanted to share it with you today. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this morning. Hope you all have a great 2026. If you had any questions, you can shoot them at me.
Recording stopped.
All right, Rich, I'm not seeing any questions. If we receive any questions for you, we'll send them over to an email and we'll get them back out to our group.
Please do. So take care. Thank you all.
Bye. So I hope you can understand every other word. And it seemed like it got better when I stood here. I promise I don't have like a tin hat or something like that. That's why I was like, okay, I'm just going to go stand by there. So anyway, if you do come up with any questions or for Rich or any of us, please feel free to get them to us and we will pass them on to Rich and we'll get back to you with the answers. So in just a couple of minutes here, Eric Snodgrass is going to join us up front. Please, at this time, feel free to use the restrooms, refill your coffee, grab some water or soda in the back of the room, and we'll start up again in about 10 minutes.
Well, guys, I'm really excited to you about the weather. This should be a lot of fun today. That was rough. And I sat in the back and I'm like, what point did I miss that I really needed to hear? But anyway, there's a lot of great stuff up there, and I hope you got it. So listen, if you don't mind, what Rich shared, that was a lot of information. And sometimes it's hard to kind of pull all that in. That was some quality stuff that he's sharing, some of the stuff that I've seen as I've traveled the country, and that's a really good take on what's going on. But if you don't mind, this is a good sized group. They're all well fed and caffeinated. So I'm going to call a bit of an audible here. I've got this great big long slide deck planned out, and I don't really want to go through all of it. I would rather go through the things that you want to talk about. So can you kind of lead me with questions and comments, and maybe we can dive into things that you find most important. Plus, they gave me access to the internet, which means at any moment I can go find you whatever you need to get on there. There are some things I do want to hit. We do need to talk about South America. I do want to tell you what I think about spring and summer, but I also want to just convey that as the farther we look out into those time frames, there's a lot of speculation about what we see at that moment. For that time period, and just to make sure that you can stay ahead of it with time, my stuff's completely free. Right up there, there's 2 web links. The agweather.com, take advantage of it. You go to it on your phone right now if you want. It's my website. We're going to be updating that website before the month of April with brand new content, new layout. I'm excited about it. I was working on it back in Rich before I came up here. And then below that is nutrientactsolutions.com/weather. So I work for Nutrient. I'm a senior science fellow, and I write a report every Monday. It just goes out via email. So if you go to that second web address, nutrientactsolutions.com/weather, you just get signed up for it. Now, be very clear about this. The form that's out there, it asks you for a lot of information, and information just goes to me. That's it. So don't think I'm like selling it on to somebody else. We're just trying to capture as much information as we can, because in the event that this is as successful as it's been, we're going to try to even start offering simple text message services if you want those as well. But that'll be something you can opt in or opt out. But every Monday afternoon, just write a report, goes out to your email. Right? So listen, I know there's a lot floating around in your heads. I know where we are in these markets. I understand the anxiety around weather and around the markets and around geopolitics. And I do about 105 of these events a year. And I'm very happy to be in North Dakota. I was last week in Little Rock, Arkansas. If you'd like to meet a bunch of depressed farmers, go to Arkansas right now. That is the place to be. So anyways, wait, should I stand? Okay. I felt like I was cutting out there for a second. So anyways, I want to dig into what you want to talk about. So what, you lead me. Someone just start telling me, hey, cover this first. What do you want to hear about?
Will it rain this summer?
That's a good question. Is it going to rain this summer? You know, so I was thinking about this morning, and we were just chatting in the back of the room. I mean, we're in February, and this has been an interesting winter. In fact, where I live down in Illinois, parts of Iowa, Indiana, the Mid-South, the Delta, they're asking, like, is it going to rain now? Because they're trying to recover moisture soon so that they can start getting into the ground. They'll try to do this mid-March in parts of the Delta. And then we're sitting up here going, well, when do we break away warm? Because we're all kind of tired of winter. I am tired of winter. And the thing about right now is we just have to be patient. I mean, you all know this. This is a drill. It's February. If by March into April, and especially into early May, I've not seen good moisture recovery here, then I'm going to start ringing the alarm bell. All right, that's what's going to be the most important thing. But I'll tell you what I'm going to be watching most carefully. Okay, this is a good question. The success of North Dakota agriculture depends primarily on 2 things to start your season. First, okay, what's drought look like to your west? I feel like that way is west, am I right? Oh, thank God. Okay, so what's drought look like to your west? I think about the Missouri River Basin as an example. So coming out of Montana, to the western side of this state, do we get good snowpack on that river basin? I want that to be there so we can get the water into the ground and start to fill things up from below. The second thing is going to be, piggybacking on that, if drought survives spring in the western half of this state, it will be here by June and July. It is very, very rare that you start off with western North Dakota drought that by midsummer doesn't expand into central and eastern North Dakota. So we got to watch that. What can negate all of that, and this is the second thing, is the position of my favorite thing in the world is study. Okay, and I'll tell you a story to get that set up, then I'll show it to you what it looks like, okay? So I was giving a talk in Iowa last January, and at the end of that talk, I had a bunch of people that just came up and wanted to ask questions. At the very end of the line was this little kid. He was with his dad, an Iowa farmer, and his son. And a little kid comes up, he's 10 years old, and he says, "Mr. Snodgrass, can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure, bud." And he pulls out of his back pocket his little autograph book. He's like, "Can you autograph this for me?" And I'm like, "You gotta be kidding. I've never been asked to autograph anything." And I'm like, "Yes." And who do I make it out to? And I sign my name on it. And the dad is just standing over this little kid. He is proud as can be. And the kid goes, "Can I ask you another question?" He's 10 years old. I said, "Yeah, what's up?" And he goes, "What's your favorite kind of weather?" And I'm sitting here going, all right, I know what this kid's thinking. He's thinking about every form of severe weather he's ever seen on YouTube or the television, right? So he wants me to tell him about every time I've been in tornadoes or ridden on the Hurricane Hunter or seen massive dust storms or been in lake effect snow, just rattle off my almost died weather scenarios. He just wants to hear some stories. And I had to look at the little kid and I said, all right, you really know what my favorite kind of weather is? What my favorite thing to forecast is? He's like, yeah. And I said, all right, they're called subtropical high pressure systems. And he did exactly what you all just did. He's like, what? He literally goes, what are they? And I think he was thinking that I was unlocking some new crazy form of severe weather that he was going to go home and probably look up on YouTube and spend the whole rest of the day watching crazy videos. Because what do? And I had to look at the little kid and I said, nothing. Like they don't do anything. They're massive areas of high pressure, clear skies, light winds. You're not under a subtropical high today, you're under an Arctic high. That's what they do. This is this. And he literally is like, you like to forecast clear blue skies? And I'm like, yep. He said, why? I said, let me tell you something, kid. I know all the fun stuff out there. I've seen all the tornado chase videos. I've chased storms for 25 years. It's a lot of fun. I said, but the reality is this. You live in Iowa, and you guys up here in the Dakotas need to get this, okay? I said, we have high pressure that flanks North America. So if my hand is North America, you have on one side a Bermuda high, and on the other side a Pacific high. And these two high pressure cells sit over the open ocean. I said, now listen to me. If that high pressure cell, for all of 2025, and I'll say it again, for all of 2026, if the high pressure cell in the middle of summer is anchored over this island nation called Bermuda, that's going to be a disaster for us. And he looks up and he's like, Dad's like, why? I said, because if that high pressure cell is over Bermuda all summer long, the flow comes around the bottom of it, straight up the gut of the Mississippi River Basin, and rains in all of the Corn Belt, all summer long. He's like, why is that a problem? I said, do you not want the prices to recover? I mean, for 20 years of my life doing weather forecasting, I always thought the smartest thing to do was forecast nice weather, right? Make everybody happy. Get the good weather out there. You all secretly want a disaster right now, right? Because there doesn't seem to be anything coming on the demand side. So we're looking for something on the supply side, a supply side shock. I said, you can't have that. You cannot have that if the Bermuda high is at home in Bermuda, because the flow goes around the high and comes up the gut of the Mississippi, and it makes the moisture available to make storms up here. It makes storms in Illinois, in Iowa, and everywhere in between. And the problem is we have been busting yields those years, but the end result is it drives the price into the ground. Not just for this year, but what it does to global supply, it keeps going. I said, no, kid. What you want is you want that high pressure cell that's sitting off the southeast coast to go, I don't know, just get it to go as far away as you possibly can, maybe over toward Africa. I said, if you can just get that thing to get away, middle of summer, we're going to shut all this moisture off. No flow will come out of the Gulf of Mexico. First states to feel it, Louisiana, Mississippi, then Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, then Illinois, then Iowa, and then you all. And what will happen is the market will start to respond. We're not getting rain in June and into early July. And I said the last time that happened, that in July, the Bermuda high was way off over mean, way off, over by like Africa, was 2012. I said, do you remember 2012? He says, no, I wasn't born. I said, okay. Let me tell you something you do remember, kid. I said, I'm going to tell you about a time when the Bermuda High wasn't over in Africa. It wasn't over Bermuda, but instead it was over Atlanta. He said, you slide that high pressure over to Atlanta, you will now amplify the flow coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, or Gulf of America. I still don't know what to call it. But the Gulf, moisture is going to come north. It's not going to stop. And it's going to be repeated thunderstorm complexes 3 to 4 times a week. Now, you were alive the last time this happened. We called it 2019. And the river systems throughout the midsection of the United States were completely flooded out. We didn't plant a crop in Illinois until late June. I have a picture of my son standing in front of corn on July the 9th in Illinois, where the corn, when he was just 7 years old, came up to his knees. And he got out of the truck. He's like, why are we doing this, Dad? I'm like, Graham, I have never seen corn on July the 9th in Illinois that was shorter than you. It's normally taller than me. So get out there and get your dumb picture taken so I can remember this. And so, but this is the thing. So the kid's looking up at me and he's like, all right. I said, so this is what you need to know. You have a question about rain. This is going to rain. You're going to get rain this summer. I'm going to tell you, you got to watch high pressure more than low. Because I told the kid, all of the fun weather you could ever think about, it all bows the knee to high pressure. It has to go around it. It has to go around it. It can't go through it or over it. It has to avoid it. So you have to be looking at the negative space all the time. Now, with all that being said, let me kind of show you what I just explained to you kind of in a few slides here, all right? I told you, you're going to be happy that we're not going to go through all these. I'm going to be able to show you kind of some fun stuff in bits and pieces. First of all, you want to see what's going on right now with your snowpack? No. Let me show you 2 things. This is over winter drought, okay? That's since December 1st, our precipitation ranks by climate district. So there's 134 years of data in the system. So if you're 134, you're driest over the time frame. If you're 1, you're wettest. So there's an issue. We've got some dry. Wait a minute, North Dakota, we're doing okay. Yeah, because you had some good moisture early in the winter. And you still have some of that snow. They're not much, but there's still some. But look at Nebraska, South Dakota, coming to like where the Missouri, Mississippi, and Ohio come together, the Delta. It's very, very dry. But I'm concerned about this. Right now, we've got a ton of water on the headwaters, ton of water in the snow on the headwaters of Mississippi. But I've got some issues with the rest of the Missouri Basin. And this matters. I mean, I'll show you something here real quick. By the way, the kid I was telling you about, my son, let me just show you this real fast. We'll skip this. There was a big snowstorm out east, in case you didn't hear. That's my boy in the front there. That's Graham. That's my nephew, Miller. These 2 brainiacs decided they wanted to run to the pool over the little Christmas break we were at. Minus 11 degrees outside. They're like, we're not going to wear our shirts. And I'm like, okay, I will gladly record this, but I think this is stupid. 11 inches of snow. All of that was in northern Wisconsin. And as you look at this map, look how dry that whole western part of the country is. Now, one of the other pieces of me trying to figure out if you're going to have problems with summer rainfall, by the way, they did snow angels for 4 hours with no shirts on. Snow angel, run inside and get in the hot tub. And don't you miss being 7 and 13? Like, that's what life was like. But back to this. If we do not begin to correct some of the dryness, right now it's seen in snow deficits. That's drought that can migrate here by summer. And we're watching it. You know who's really watching it? Everybody in the Eastern Corn Belt. Every year they want you to have a problem. Oh, and guess what? You'd love it if Illinois was destroyed, right? Just wipe them off the face of the earth. I get it. I live there. I know why no one likes us. And this is it. It's always a competition. So with that being said, let me just show you this. Right now, if I can turn this on, right now one of our bigger issues is that the Nebraska, you saw how dry Nebraska was, you've got to watch drought in Nebraska. That's drought that can migrate here in summer. Right now, the Platte River system at the end of March is at record low snowpack. And if that doesn't get snow in it, where are we going to get the flow for that until you get fully into spring? And then look at this, going a little farther west, the Colorado River Basin right now. I mean, this is the water that feeds the Colorado River Basin. It is at record low right there. So there's some issues that we're trying to get over. But I told you, that's your overwinter issues. What about by the time you get into summer? Let's just jump ahead and take a look at it here. Okay? Told you I got a lot of slides. Look right here. Okay? How about this? We'll just go here. I like this one. All right. I always watch where spring drought sets up and where it doesn't set up. This was last spring. When you go through March into April, May, and early June, one of the key things you need to be watching is drought to your south and west, right? That's, you got to watch it. If it's going to come from somewhere, that's where it's going to come from. It's not going to come from Canada. It's going to come from your south or west. All last spring, this whole area was completely flooded out. Keep that in mind, because I'm going to give you a spring forecast in a little bit. Now, why is that important that all this area down here was so saturated? It's important because of this. If you're thinking about the entirety of the Corn Belt, I'm just going to show you what happens if there's spring drought down south. If that Bermuda high comes back, and the flow around it does something like this, which is the way the flow typically comes around the Bermuda high, who gets the moisture first? Well, it's that area down there. I think I just clicked the play button. Sorry, I got a new clicker because I lost my other one in Florida last week. And I've got to get used to these buttons. There we go. So watch it again. Here we go. Bermuda high returns, moisture comes through. They get the moisture first. You see, it's always what's between you and your moisture source. And therefore, if anything's coming from the west and there's drought in the west, guess what? The drought migrates east. If there's drought to your south, guess what? It migrates north. So that's always going to be the concern going forward. But here's the real bit. Okay, now listen and watch this. You ask the question, is it going to rain this summer? By the time we get into June, this is exactly what we'll be talking about every day. Have you noticed that when you get into the summer months, your storms like to come from that direction? They come at you out of the northwest corner of this state, and they sweep all the way down into the southeast United States. They come from there. Why? Well, in the middle of summer, the thing we have to watch to see if that's going to happen is right inside that box. Now listen to me carefully, okay? If in spring, you have to observe where drought already is to tell you if it's going to migrate. That's it. In the middle of summer, you're going to watch that box. Now this was April 1st, 2025. This is a year ago. And there was major concerns about drought a year ago. Remember all the meetings we went to last winter? It's like, get ready, it's going to be a big drought, big drought, big drought's coming in 2025. I mean, there's a guy over in Iowa that says this drought in 2025 was going to be the biggest he's ever seen. He's been predicting for 25 years. This was last year. Did you have drought? No, it's stormed like that. Why? What can make rain? Watch right here. Inside that box. Now, what we need to think about for this box is one idea. If the water inside that box, not like it is here, but if it gets cold, if the Northeast Pacific goes cold, that is your major red flag that the western side of the state is going to have plenty of moisture and the Red River Valley has none. You're saying, why? Okay, watch. If it's cold in there, the jet goes south of it and builds up into a huge ridge that's centered on St. Louis. Now you see that inner circle there, that inner arrow? That's where all the storms are going to live. They're just going to orbit around that, which means the western side of the state gets moisture, the eastern side does not. That's only if the waters go cold there. That's your only preseason indicator in midsummer that there's an issue. Now, last year, okay, did the waters get cold there? Well, no. This is, I keep pushing that other button. Amazon, why don't you just give me the same clicker? There we go. Here we go. Watch. We just saw this. Watch the box. There it is dipping. All right, we got all this down. Now watch. If you go from April 1st, 2025 to then August, see how hot it got in that box? Right there. If the ocean temperatures in that box are hot, your chances of ridge-riding thunderstorms that hit the eastern half of the state increase dramatically. Like, that's the secret sauce. What I don't like about my job is that I won't be able to tell you if that's going to be the case for summer until June 15th. I gotta wait. I have to wait to see if those ocean temperatures do that, because if they do, the flow goes over the top and dives, the Bermuda high undercuts, and it storms like mad in the middle. So you say, is it going to storm this summer? I'm going to tell you, I'm going to watch the ocean temperatures in the Gulf of Alaska. And by the way, no, this is not El Nino, La Nina. That's all the way down here. I'm looking up there. So, putting this all together, have a look at this. Every year we've had super hot and dry summers. I labeled where the Bermuda high is, which is the moisture pump, in the middle of summer. And there it is. During every one of those years that you see labeled up there, here in the Gulf of Alaska, the ocean temperatures were cold. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s. That is a decade-long time frame where the Gulf of Alaska ocean temperatures were well below average. You're saying, how do you know that? It's not satellites back then. We had ship tracks taking measurements the whole time. So, when the Bermuda High is there, what ends up happening is the flow goes around it, and that's usually the arrow that pumps the moisture through the Gulf that brings you moisture. For storm, the wind that brings the moisture. Now watch this. Every good yielding year, our stormy and wet summers, I've labeled where the Bermuda High was. Okay? So the flow comes around it like this, over the heat that's in the west, and it all meets in the middle in storms. So you go, no, why is there big high pressure in the northwest? Because it's hot just off the coast. So between now and then, I'm trying to figure out if we're going to find ourselves in a position to have hot Gulf of Alaska temperatures that can drive storm activity in the middle of summer. Until then, I'm going to see where drought survives spring. And right now, I got guys from Nebraska saying, this is the driest I've ever seen it in winter. This is terrible. We're going to have problems. And I said, yes, but it's still February. We need to have this conversation April 21st. If you've not recovered your moisture by then we have an issue to talk about. But right now, we got to be patient with this whole pattern. Let me build on to this. Since you brought up summer, I'm just going to show you right now what the models are trying to do for summer. Look at this. This makes my point.
Does that mean it's going to rain in Canada, so we're not so smoky from all the fires?
Oh, but you want it to be smoky in Canada.
Okay.
I mean, we want Canada to burn. I don't mean that. I mean, Canada or California, you pick. Oh gosh, you're recording this, aren't you? Don't send this to my Canadian friends. No, let me tell you why I said that. Okay? And I only said that because I'm here. And just remember, I work for Nutrient. We're a Canadian-owned company, so please don't share that with them. But listen, the reason why this is so important is that every time we have all of that wildfire smoke in Canada, I mean, I'm talking burning the Canadian forests. That smoke comes over the top of you here in North Dakota at 35 to 60,000 feet. And when you put that much smoke in the upper atmosphere, it serves as almost like a, I don't know a better way to describe it, but it diffuses the sunlight. We have found that in the most recent big wildfire events that have not been in the Midwest, but have been around, either in the Western Canada, we think, based upon the research that was done, we looked at temperatures compared to average, we think it's worth 5 degrees of cooling. So now you're in the middle of summer, worried about those days you're 95 to 100, and that smoke in the upper atmosphere can take it and drop it down 5 degrees. So smoke deep in the atmosphere is great. Smoke near the ground is bad for our crops. So we don't want that. You get smoke tank, you have problems with a whole lot of other things like transpiration, all sorts of stuff. Plus it seems to affect the plant physiology if you have smoke that's actually touching the crop itself. Deep in the atmosphere, we're good for that. Now, to put a final pin in all of this, look at the forecast that was just released by the European model. That is one of our best performing models, okay? June, July, and August, I wrote very stormy summer. And the reason why, I put it all up here, is this. Right now, that model, in order to make that precipitation forecast, has got a warm Atlantic and warm North Pacific. It can't do anything but make rain. But you have to understand something. If that model was always right, I wouldn't be here. Like, what would I do? I'd just be like, well, I just send you the map. No reason for me to show up and tell you stories and stuff. I just go, no, this is it. The sad part about all of this is, would you like to see what that model said last year?
Yes.
Yeah, good, because I'm going to go show it to you. Look. This was last year. Guy from Iowa. Dust Bowl coming in 2025. That was the big claim. Terrible, terrible year. We've done a lot to kind of refute those claims, and of course it didn't work. But that was 2024's fall drought. And that's how dry the soils were. That's down 40 centimeters or 16 inches, most of the entirety of the century in the bottom 2 percentile. And we knew something about that. We knew that 60% of the time, not 100%, but 60% of the time, the May to August that followed a surviving overwinter drought. You understand what I'm saying? A fall drought that doesn't get cured in winter, we tended to be dry and we tended to be hot, especially where you are. We also knew this. We had a La Nina last winter. We had one this winter too. One last winter that was not projected to fade in summer, and it didn't. And it turns out that along that corridor right there, so basically Red River of the south to Red River of the north, all the years that that's happened in the past, we tended to be dry and hot. And this is what the models all said last March, predicting last June, July, August. They predicted that. Mega drought. And I went around the country going, look, you see the maps. Can I give you the probability? The probability is 60% that in the western Corn Belt, which you're included in, we have a drought in the middle of summer. 60%. And there's an issue that we have as humans in that we don't understand probabilistic statistics. People forget, if I tell you there's a 60% chance of something happening, there's a 40% chance it doesn't. We tend to take anything that's greater than 50% and make it a yes, and anything below 50% make it a no. And that's fine, because you have to execute decisions. It's hard to execute a decision on a probability. I mean, there's like a 4% chance that as I drive over to Minneapolis tonight that I get in some sort of a car accident, right? If I base my life purely on that risk, I shouldn't drive anywhere. My son just kills me. I love this kid, but he's like, Dad, do you ever worry about your plane crashing? And I'm like, no, don't have time to worry. I don't want to worry about that. I'm like, don't ask me that the night before I have to fly, though. Crying out loud, kid. But we make decisions based off of a range of options, and you just need to know this. And I've been using this example for years, but it makes a ton of sense to me. If I were to tell you that today there is a 99% chance of more snow, if it snows outside, I'm right, right? But do you understand that if it doesn't snow outside today, I'm still right? I told you there's a 1% chance. And this is why that stupid joke, how you meteorologists can be wrong half the time and keep it. No, we're never wrong, because we always tell you about the future and probabilities. It's a stupid little trick we play, and we do it to keep our jobs. We do it also because you all have short-term memory loss problems, and you forget what we say anyway. So we just go. But last year, the risk was 60%. Would you like to know what your risk is in North Dakota developing drought every summer? Your risk is actually about 35%. So 3.5 and 10 years, your drought situation in April will be higher by July. That means 6.5 out of 10 years, it doesn't change. Most of the time, we actually have moisture to grow a crop. And what's really funny is, some of your best yielding years, you're tending to be starved of moisture early and get it late. The plant, for some reason, just tends to take off when you stress it a little early and give it a little bit of moisture later on. I don't know. But these were all the predictions, and then this is what happened. That's how wet it was in July. And this clown from Missouri loved to tweet at me, worst run drought in history, Snockers. That's my Twitter handle. I'm like, yeah, like I had this all planned out for you, man. Like, yeah, we missed it. What did we miss? Early season moisture south. Hot Gulf of Alaska temperatures. That was a short question with a 20-minute answer. But that's what we're looking at. So, to cap it off, since we just jumped way ahead here, let's just go look at it one more time. These are the forecasts right now for summer. Can I walk you through them real quick? Let's just start here. We have an El Nino event taking shape. We've only had one in the last 6 years. That one happened in 2023. What I will be watching right now is that if we had a La Nina surviving into spring, we tend to light up the Red River of the south over to where the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi is, just like last year. My concern is we're going into a drought. Excuse me. No. Erase that from your head. We're going into an El Nino. El Ninos tend to reduce spring storm systems to your south. Now here's the end result. If this is right, your drought risk is going to go up. Why? Because the plains to your south will be dry. Any moisture that comes up from the south gets to them first. And this is just the historical correlations. El Ninos tend to reduce this. So here's what you need to do. I don't know if you guys like to watch other storm chasers. There's some really famous ones out there. There's one guy named Reed Timmer. The dude's crazy, but I love his stuff. You all know Jim Cantori, right? You know that guy, the weather channel. Here it is. This is all you need to understand. if Reed Timmer and Jim Cantori spend April and May in Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, there will not be a discussion at all about drought for the Dakotas or Minnesota. Nope. But if Reed and Jim Cantori are chasing storms in the Delta or in the Southeast, then I'm worried. You're going to explain this. That means all of the good spring activity is here and not here. And that's what we're going to watch. So what are the models saying? Well, I got two maps. The one on the left is from a model that we run in the United States. It's called the NMME, National Multi-Model Ensemble. And what you've got is, it's got a little bit of dryness to your south, March, April, May, and a little bit more here. This is one of my more concerning models, because if it does not return some Kansas moisture by the time we get into April, May, and June, it could be an issue. By the way, folks in Iowa, Illinois, the Central Corn Belt are licking their chops at this. They love a dry spring. Get in fast, get in early, and bring the rains on later. But I don't like it if that stays dry. What are other models saying? Well, this is the newest run from the European. It's like, no, everybody's wet, except for maybe these guys. See that? April, May, June. It's got the whole area wet. That's what you have over here. March, April, May, June. That's your risk-off model. Now, why even show you these if I told you they're not very good? Okay? Because I'm going to show you some analogs in a second. I'm showing you these because Rich and a whole lot of other market analysts, sometimes they will just take the models and use them as the narrative. Because that's all they got. That's fine. And they'll sometimes build a narrative off of it. In fact, we have had good spring rallies on summer scares in the past, right? There's actually no knowledge of what summer's going to do, but oh, there's worry. Oh, there's problems. We're going to have an issue. Well, they'll sometimes do that. Right now, maybe why Rich's tone was so bad, he's like, sell whenever you can. It's because what about that says there's going to be a problem? I don't see it. Let's keep going. Analogs.
Question on
Yes.
the last map, I'm so sorry to say.
No, keep interrupting, please.
So when you see that, like the March through May from North Dakota there?
Yep.
Do you see like snow, like on Mother's Day for us? Or do you think that's gonna be potential, I mean, for temperature trends is what I'm asking. Do you think we're gonna have an early spring getting in, or do you think we're gonna be having to have our snow blowers out until the middle of May?
I don't until the middle of May. But you're not going to like me for saying this. I always kind of secretly hope and pray for a good April 10th blizzard for you. I mean, to be honest with you, whenever you get a big blizzard in that point in the year, you get to keep all the water in that snow. And after April, go ahead, crank up temperatures. We are not done with cold air yet. I do believe that we have a big warm up. You've probably seen the forecast. It's going to get warm and warmer and warmer. But I see the end of March dropping temperatures back down again for the start of April. I don't see the Mother's Day problem though this year. Last year we had a cool, like Labor Day, or Memorial Day weekend even. It was cold across the whole central part of the United States. So no, I think this is going to be a summer that when we make the break, and I think it'll be mid-April for you, we break away and stay broken away. Because there's nothing setting up this year like it did last year for the cold we saw at the end of April, beginning of May, and then into June as well. I think you're going to make the break. Real quick, and this map might help a little bit with it. March to May, right over there on the right, all the years that had La Nina winters that got into El Nino summers, they tended to have access to cold air through March into April. That's why that's shaded on the cooler side of things. But once you got through mid-April, we tended to break pretty quick. Now, something interesting to note is all of my analog years do keep it dry here. And we're going to watch that. Because that's drought to your south. We worry about that expanding north with time. Okay? The best thing that can happen for the Dakotas is that the drought starts in Kansas, but builds in Texas. So you either want Canada to burn or Texas to burn. Actually, that's what we should hope for. Because the hotter Texas gets, the more the ridge riders go over the top of it and hit you all summer. Get you good rain. Have you noticed like your best weather happens when something bad happens somewhere else? Like that just is. That's how it works. Those are my March through May analogs. This is the current outlook from a statistical model. So if you take note, it's driest down there, kind of in the headwaters of the Red River of the South. It does not have you with below normal precipitation. This is a good model run out of Columbia University. let's add another one onto it. This is what I think might happen by June, July, and August. Texas may take on heat, which would be great. We do not, when you stitch all those years together, tend to have super hot summers. It's not bad. It's a risk-off forecast. And you notice you don't get dry either. You're like, what about that little spot? No. We tend to get good storm activity. We generally like El Nino events in the Dakotas, and we've got one coming. Could be a strong one. Let me show you one more thing. He showed you this. How about this? When I correlate El Nino weather with summer precipitation patterns, we tend to be driest in the Cotton Belt, especially in Texas. It tends to be hottest from Texas to New Mexico. And we tend to get ridge riders during summer. Now, we love and hate ridge riding thunderstorms. You want me to show you how much you hate them? This is pretty easy. Let me just take you back to this. Remember this day? This was the 20th. Did these storms get anybody in this room? All of you? You have to understand something. When I was watching this on radar, I'm sitting there going, tomorrow is going to be a rough day to see what happened. A pair of supercells, that's the Enderlin one right there. And then a squall line that chased it at 130 miles an hour. I don't remember ever seeing a pair of storm systems like this together. That one to the south, you can actually see the hook echo on it right there, is the one that produced the EF5 tornado. It's like the most recent one we've had before that. I think it was 12 or 13 years before the previous. And the only video evidence we had of it was that Ring doorbell. This go across your news? Yeah, that was it. That was the wall cloud around that tornado. Absolutely terrifying event that came through there. The consequence of not being dry is that you tend to get big arcing lines of storms like the derecho event on the backside of this and severe weather. I mean, you guys farm in the Dakotas. When I used to teach at the University of Illinois, I always get asked, like, where's the most unpredictable, chaotic weather? I'm like, easy, North and South Dakota. The National Weather Service can't forecast your weather, neither can we. Do you know that you're the most difficult spot in the nation to predict weather for? They did a 125-year survey, the National Weather Service, and added up their error scores. And from Rapid City to Sioux Falls and up to Grand Forks and then back over to almost Glasgow, that box, we're terrible. Got it. What's that?
What was the best Hawaii?
No, the best is San Diego. 300 days of sunshine. And when it rains down there, oh my gosh. You should go to Southern California when it rains. People lose their minds. They don't go to work. There's wrecks everywhere. Okay, another question. Can you keep me on time? I did bring my charger for my watch.
When's it gonna freeze?
Like today? What do you mean? Yeah, this spring? Oh, in fall. Let's look at something. That's a good question. I'm going to show you something that I think is quite important here. I'm going to go to a website called Climate at a Glance. This is where NOAA puts all of its historic weather data. It's a good source. And we'll do this by state just for right now. Let's go ahead and pick North Dakota. There you are. And what I'm going to look at here is average temperature. I'm going to use the month. Actually, let's do a 2-month. And we're going to look over the months of October, November. I'm going to choose those 2 months. I'm going to put a trend on this from let's start at, how about 1970? That's a good start. Okay, so the plot that I'm going to make here for you, there you go, is your average fall temperatures, and I've got a trend line from 1970. Now, as you look at it, you're like, okay, that doesn't look like much of a trend, but you have to understand, this is a 5-degree increase. So your fall temperatures have actually seen an increase of about 0.5 degree per decade since 1970. So this is worth 3.5 degrees. Your fall temperatures have actually been trending a bit warmer with time. I wish I could put that same trend in April. But we're tending to get drier and warmer falls now it bounces all over the place, right? I mean, and you're not outside of climate variability, but when you detrend it, we've actually been seeing some warmer falls. There's another way to do this, and if you ever want to do this on your own, you can. I'm going to try to do it real fast. If you just go to weather.gov, weather.gov, there it is. We can come up here and just click on this area. And then I'm going to use the Fargo office, but I'm going to go to climate and past weather events. I just clicked on that. I'm going to go to now data. I'm curious if they've got what towns they have. Do you mind if I just pick, I'll just pick Fargo for today's sake. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on what's called the first and last dates. When I click on this, I can choose a range. Now, I don't know how far back the data go here, but I'm going to pretend it goes back to 1900. I'm going to look for a criteria of the minimum temperature less than or equal to 32. And what it's going to do is it's going to produce a chart. So you can see all the dates. So this is your typical spring last frost, in this case, May 9th, 1900. First frost was September 17th. You can take these data out of there, just look at it. And what I'm curious about is if we go toward modern day, let's get down here. Look how many Octobers we have. Whereas, can you see it? It's kind of at an angle, I know for you. But back in the day, it was a whole lot of Septembers. That's what the extra 3 to 4 degrees is doing. It's just giving you another couple of weeks. Now, do you get to use that? You don't get any GDPs out of it. It's just prolonging that first frost event in the fall. But overall, I mean, it was May back in 1900s, and it's still April and May at the end. If I could flip that around, well, Snodgrass superpower, that would be the first thing I'd probably try to do. But on average, in the Dakotas, we have estimated that you've picked up about 12 additional frost-free days since 1980. But they're all coming at the end. So I'm sorry. That's an excellent question. Sorry to teach you about it. It was -5 this morning, and I have actually a nice shirt underneath this, but I'm not taking this off. I was cold. Good question. What else? Come on. I saw the amount of sugar you all ate when you came in here. Should still be plenty of brain power. Can I give you some bad news? How does it ruin your day? I would want nothing more for there to be some sort of supply side shock from Brazil. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Brazil because Rich covered this a minute ago. Let me preface it with this. I wonder when we're going to stop talking about China. Like all we do is talk about Chinese demand, right? And I understand it. China buys a lot of beans. But I wonder how many years it'll be until we start talking about, well, more about Pakistan, or Indonesia, or Nigeria, or all of sub-Saharan Africa. Those are our fastest growing populations. You know, Nigeria has like 250 million people. And sub-Saharan Africa is going through a revolution, very similar to what the rest of the developed world did. And their demand for protein and their availability of money is going to change. We're going to have to think strategically about how we position ourselves going forward with sending them grain. I think it's in the next 10 years because China has very unsteady legs in terms of its population. So y'all know they had that one-child policy for so long. Okay? The one-child policy has made their population pyramid very unstable. Shoot, we have internet, I'll show it to you. I'm only showing you this because this is what Brazilians ask me all the time. Population, oh, here it is, China. So you have male, female, and then you have by age group. Healthy population pyramids, tiny at the top, they get bigger, and they have straight sides. That's what we like. Theirs is fat right here, from 55 and above, and gets very narrow the farther down you go. Let me pull this up here. There you go. See that? They don't have any kids. And their population, look over here, peaked in 2020 and is going down quickly. And right now, some of the estimates are for them to be below 1 billion people, actually faster than this. A lot of us are thinking like 2055 to 2060. And the question is, who's going to pick up the slack? You want to see what a crazy population pyramid looks like? Let's go to, it's a little finicky, India. Let me do this. Have a look at that. Oh, come on. Look how fat theirs is. Or, you want to see a really crazy one, go to Nigeria. Look at that. That is the future consumer of global protein. And it will be during your lives as you're farming. And I'm very curious, like they're at 232 million right now. Their projected population by the end of the century is not just past the United States, but past us by 100 million people. And if you think about where China's doing all of its investing right now, it's in sub-Saharan Africa and Brazil. And every time I meet with the Brazilians, every summer, all they want to talk about is their future production. And I overlaid for you the United States so you can understand you can fit the entire continent of the United States inside of Brazil. Yeah, in Alaska, we're bigger. Without them, we're smaller. I'm also going to tell you this. In 2021, 2 studies were done to try to assess how much available land Brazil has to put into production. Not Amazon, not where people live, but just pasture land. And it is the equivalent of the Great Plains of the United States and Canada. The plains in Canada. That's 400 million acres. Now, realistically, talking to the Brazilians, I say, I meet with 2 groups every single summer. We meet Loyola University in Chicago. And I ask them every year, your pace right now suggests that in the next 10 years, you're going to add another 40 million acres into production for corn and soybeans. Do you think that pace is going to be higher than that? And the room just says, no, we think we're going to put another 40 million acres. The reason they're on that pace is because the increased demand in China has been such that they're able to put that in place. But here's the funny thing about Brazilian growers. Rich barely mentioned this, but I want to make a point here. What Brazil wants is they want the Chinese to buy their beans, but their beans to be measured against US dollar. So have you ever heard someone come up and talk about the BRICS nations and their proposal to have their own currency? Have you heard of this? Brazilians may say that they want that because the Chinese are investing so much in their infrastructure, but you go talk to an individual grower, they want their bean measured against the US dollar, not a currency controlled by another nation. So they're wanting to ride this out as long as they possibly can. And right now, Rich said how big their crop is. They had 8 straight weeks of record high satellite-based plant health. They're moving along pretty quickly with harvesting soybeans. There's a bit of a delay in corn. I think there's actually a story out of corn production in Brazil. I've seen some of the major market analysts pull back on the size of that crop, which could be interesting. And as Rich showed you, we do have some issues down in Argentina with a couple of pockets of drought here. And over the next few weeks, we do expect that region to go dry. By the way, all those maps, the weather maps Rich always shows, he just takes them from my website. So you can go have them for free. They're right there, okay? Just go get them. I need to put a logo on here so that you can all see. But there it is, dryness down south. That could be an issue, but I'll be honest with you, the bigger issue is not the dryness. I actually want it to stay super wet in the north, especially in this state right here. That's Mato Grosso. You could put almost 5 North Dakotas inside of Mato Grosso. That's how big it is. If Mato Grosso seceded from Brazil, it'd be the 5th largest, it'd be the 3rd largest producing soybean country in the world. And so to see them wet, especially east of there, going into their harvest and planting, this is fantastic. We want them to have problems and slow down. That puts pressure on the safrinha corn. We'll see. But the first crop of beans is absolutely enormous. So what else is this have you thinking about? Oh, we spent 40 minutes on 2 questions. There's got to be
How
another
long do
one.
you think the corn surplus will last? Couple more years?
I would tell you that we're one weather disaster away from it being not even lasting that long. We are possibly, though, if we string together 2 good years of weather, that includes us in South America, then this corn surplus is going to last for half a decade. We need a problem. Actually, what we need is a demand side new thing. This is why all the push for ethanol and the biofuels and all this is, people are trying to get that work done, but it's, I mean, I've been to DC many times. I had to testify before Congress in 2023. I have to tell you that I appreciate that it moves slowly. I actually don't want fast-moving government, believe it or not. But at the same time, it gets a bit frustrating when there's topics that affect your livelihood. Good question. I will tell you that the Brazilians prefer to grow beans over corn. They'd much rather grow a bean crop because beans are a bit more tropical in nature, and so are they. Corn is super high input for them, and they don't have a winter. But when you will have China buying everything, because China cannot change its agricultural infrastructure to grow production level crops like the United States and Brazil can. China has 1 million little farms, 1 million 1-acre farms. They all share equipment, and they just don't grow enough to feed all their folks. Good point. What else is floating around your heads? Well, can I tell you something I want you all to avoid? Please help me. Just help me. Then how am I doing on time?
Good.
Okay. I have, for most of my life, this has been my biggest competition with forecasting weather. I mean, you all know this is just for fun, right? Okay. This is a groundhog in Ohio that likes to eat this guy's produce right in front of this trail cam. And the reason that he does this is because the guy put his trail cam inside of a glass box and he can see his reflection. And he apparently sits there and eats like he's eating with a friend. But I am always amazed at the number of folks that ask me for weeks following Groundhog's Day, like, did he get it right? I'm like, no, he never gets it right. Do you understand this? His skill score's 30%. That is worse than the models I showed you, okay? He always predicts more winter, and this is a funny bit about the groundhog. Remember, this animal, this rodent, should be hibernating until early March. And when it comes out of hibernation, it's crazy. When it hibernates, it breathes like twice a minute. Its heart beats 5 times a minute. When it comes out of hibernation, the first thing it wants to do is find a mate. So this is the reason why the guy gets bit when he yanks it out of the cage. It's like, no, I'm looking for my lady friends, you're not it. But the groundhogs. I bring this up because I deal with, so keep it on button, I'm sorry. I deal with some very interesting things on the internet that I compete against when trying to figure out the weather. Let me take you back just a few weekends ago to the beginning of the month on February 1st. We had Arctic air that got all the way down to Florida, and the temperatures outside in Florida got down well below freezing. In fact, just in the Everglades down here, they recorded a freezing temperature. Cuba recorded a freezing temperature. And if you want to, again, be entertained going into the Southwest, go to Florida when it's cold. This is what kills me. There's a bunch of people that live down here that used to live here, and they've forgotten what cold is like. This was on a Sunday, and the churches around Miami were all empty because people were like, no, it's 35. It's just not doing this today. If it was 35 outside right now, we might have this meeting outside. It's like, oh, this is pretty nice, you know? But it's just the difference in how it works. But by the way, darn it, I keep pushing that stupid play button. I'm going to put a piece of tape over it. What I want you to see here is that down there, they actually have special warnings for stuff that happens whenever they have major cold snaps. The iguanas fall out of the trees. Y'all hear about this? There's the falling iguana National Weather Service warning. Turns out these things can get up to 5 feet long, weigh like 25, 30 pounds, which means when they fall out of the trees, they've been known to injure people. And it's amazing what happens down there. That one's not dead. He's just trying to warm back up. About 5 years ago, there was a big cold snap in Florida, and people went around and collected them in garbage bags and threw them in municipal garbage containers. And then when they warmed up in the garbage, they just were coming out all over the place. And we got to put a warning in place about this. I also had this. This was this epic snowfall event that hit the South. I'm going to give you a little advice here. This is kind of fun. This was back on January 24th, 25th. Not you, boy, it was Arizona all the way to Maine. When that snow came through, I found out, I didn't know these existed, but you can buy completely autonomous snowblowers. And I kind of want one of these. In fact, I'm going to make a recommendation. Your next meeting, if you have a door prize, now you're on the hook. I have one of these at home, but he is living. His name is Graham, and he does this. In fact, I got a 13-year-old boy. You saw the picture of him earlier. I love this kid to death. Saturday the 24th, he wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning. He is standing in front of our front door, fully covered in all of his snow gear, holding the shovel. And I'm sitting at the computer downstairs. He's like, Dad, where's the snow? You said it was going to snow on Saturday. I'm like, I know. Saturday afternoon. He wanted to go on shovel. So he takes all the stuff off. Well, sure enough, that afternoon we get about 10 inches of snow. And in the evening, excuse me. So he wakes up the next morning. 6 o'clock in the morning, church is canceled. He's like, I'm going to shovel. I said, have fun. Make sure you hit my driveway. And on his way out, goes out for 5 straight hours and shovels 6 of our neighbors' driveways. Comes back in with $120 and sets it down on the desk. Says, I want to get this video game. And I'm like, I admired the hustle. Like, way to go, kid. I said, but you don't have enough money. He's like, why not? I said, well, you're still about 300 short. He goes, no, the video game's only $50. There's 120 right there. I'm like, no. I said, so do you remember what happened last June when it was storming in Illinois? We were all inside on a Saturday. Your soccer tournament was canceled. Remember what we did? He's like, no. I said, well, let me remind you. Your mother and I told you repeatedly to stop kicking the soccer ball in our living room. And then you kicked it into my 86-inch television. So you're 300 short. This kid put back on his toes, went back out, and this was so brilliant. It was still snowing, hit all of those neighbors' lawns, or their driveways again, got another $10 for each one of them. So he's almost caught up to what he owes me here, but this is amazing. But I have to tell you this, stupid, I'm putting this down. I can't hit the right button on it. Down south is hilarious because this was in Dallas. Now, did you see that? Watch it again. That's on ice. Those wheels are not spinning. See that? And it just becomes kind of fun. I was in the next weekend down in Nashville for an event, and that's what 24 looked like a week later going into it. Tremendous amounts of ice in the Mid-South. Now, I'll give you a little bit of advice. I do not trade grain, but I do trade weather-adjacent things. And every time we start forecasting ice storms, you get 2 times out of the year to do this. First ice storm, first hurricane. When we start predicting big ice, and we talk about towns like Dallas, Little Rock, Memphis, Nashville, and if I say Atlanta is going to get ice, you buy stock in Generac. You understand me? Let me show you what I did. I bought it at 161 when I first started forecasting the ice. You always buy the forecast, sell the event. Understand? You know how to do this. I sold it a day before the event at 179. And that was enough of a profit for me that in 3 weeks, I'm taking my family to Disney for a week. Thank you, Generac. Now, the problem is, I sold because I was selling an event. Have you seen, go pull up on your phone Generac stock price right now. I bet it's 240 something. A week after this, so you see the down part there, a week after this, Matt, I took this graphic, Generac announced that it wants to be the main backup power supply for all of the new data centers going in around the country. And if I would have held on to this, we could have moved into Disney, I think. It shot up tremendously in that time frame. Watch that company carefully. Okay, that's enough about that. By the way, just a little bit of funny stuff here. The Weather Channel about a decade ago started naming winter storms. You know, they do this now. This one's name was Fern. These were the power outages a week after that big winter storm went through. And I guarantee you that in about 8 months from now, in Nashville, there's going to be a whole bunch of little baby girls named Fern that are born. You watch. You can understand. Okay. How about this? I was with the Amish a month ago. I showed them this video. I'm like, do you really do this when it snows? And they're like, yeah. There's 600 of these guys at a meeting with me. And they're like, we all do it. It's a lot of fun. I'm like, you should try this in a 2-wheel drive truck. It's way more fun than having your horses. So you've got to wonder what the horses are thinking. Like, can you just stop, twisting me around? It was an interesting event. And I was very surprised that Chevrolet did not use this for the Super Bowl. That's a Duramax 2500, Cincinnati. All they had to do was put little Bob Seger behind this. Super Bowl ad done. They'll outsell everything. I mean, it's incredible. But this is a pretty rough event. Now, I bring it all up because of this. Now, just listen to me, okay? I received these 2 pictures from dozens of people. The ones I have here are the ones my mom sent me. Same pictures I got from other books, but this is what my mom sent me. Did you know that before that big event we had in Illinois, excuse me, it was also in Illinois, but had in the South, there was a big Russian snowstorm, 6 feet of snow. My mom goes, is this how bad it looks over in parts of Russia? And I go, Mom, that's a 200-foot tall snowdrift over a bunch of apartment buildings. Those are actually real apartment buildings in a real town. I said, but this is what happens when you ask Grok to enhance the image. It's totally fake, Mom. Now, did they get a lot of snow? Did some of those snowdrifts go up the sides of buildings 30 feet? Yep, it did. But all that over there, not real. Then she sent me, after the ice storm hit Mississippi, she sent me this. Is it that bad in Mississippi? I said, Mom, did you look at this image carefully? Well, yeah, look at all the destruction on it. I said, no, Mom, did you look at it carefully? Like, for example, A lot of people don't build their houses that close to trees, nor do they put steps that go to nothing. See it? Or what about this car up here with headlights on the back and on the front? And then I said, and what are these guys doing? Just kneeling on the top of this weird looking SUV, and that guy's coming out of the windscreen? I was like, Mom, just zoom in on the images, and you'll realize these are all fake. But this happens non-stop. I don't know if you know this, but after this event, all of the Southerners thought your trees were going to explode. Did you hear about that? Yeah, oh yeah, this was big news down south. In fact, they even put memes out for it, me looking to see if the trees are exploding outside, okay? Then my mom sent me these videos. She goes, have you seen this? I said, yes. I mean, that tree is clearly laced with explosives, and I think that one's entirely fake. I think it's just totally fake video. Now, we vacation in northern Wisconsin. That's our spot, okay? But her question was, are the trees up north okay? So I told my mom, I said, hey, listen, remember what happened on your birthday in 2014? This is June 25th. She goes, oh yeah. My dad went outside to open up the car door for her and bring the car around because it was storming nearby. My dad wanted to beat the storm on her birthday and take her breakfast. And lightning struck a 100-foot tall pine tree, came down the tree and struck my dad in the leg. He survived the thing. Turns out 90% of people struck by lightning do survive. My dad survived, thank God. I said, do you remember what the tree looked like after that lightning strike passed 1 billion volts through it at 300,000 amps? She goes, yeah, it had a little crack down the side of it. I said, yeah, that's what happens to the tree with 300,000 amps. I said, so Mom, this is what I'm telling you. We've been going up north since 1980. And there are trees that have been up there long before that. It's been so much colder and none of them have exploded. But for some reason, if it shows up while you're sitting on the toilet scrolling through Facebook, it becomes gospel truth in your head. My biggest competition right now is this. Weird stuff like this. And folks, for some reason, get very speculative because they see something like this, and they're skeptical as well. And sometimes we forget to apply simple scientific reasoning to things. And because it's almost always about the future of something happening, we let our minds wander around, don't we? So just be careful with what you're consuming on the internet, especially when you're laying in bed and can't fall asleep or sitting on the toilet. You are more than welcome to email me and ask if anything is real. If it has to do with weather, and I know, I'll give you a right answer. But these trees are clearly laced with explosives. That's not what happens when it gets cold. In fact, the trees pull the moisture out during winter. They can't freeze and explode like this. All right. We good? All right. Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed this way more than just going through slides. So I'll turn it back over to you, and we'll get on with the day. All right?
Thank you, Eric.
You bet.
Thank you so much, Eric. If you have any questions for Eric, you saw he shared his information, or you can also generate those through us, and awesome, thank you. Just a couple more things before we let you go for the day. We've got several AIP representatives here, as well as Ihry agents, and so I'll take a minute just to point out the Ihry agents that are here. And then the AIP reps will maybe just have you quick introduce yourselves and which AIP you're with. So over on the side, we've got Teresa Miller out of the Hillsborough office, Nancy Overland out of the Hope office, J.R. Ryberg out of the Hillsborough office, Mackenzie Catton out of the Hope office, Reed Ihry out of all over, Russ Barker out of West Fargo, Mike Cazzette out of Hillsborough, and myself, Bethany Rentz. Oh, and Shane Lark. I'm sorry, Shane, there's a glare there. Shane Lark out of Hope as well. So we'll go ahead and start with the AIP representatives. Mike, if you want to just start, and we'll work our way around the room.
Mike Dollar, I'm field rep with NAU Country.
Craig Subart, North Dakota Supervisor, Palomar.
Brock Rosen, crop adjuster, northeast of North Dakota, the Palomar crop adjuster.
Landon Munn, drop adjuster with Palomar as well. Gary Fisher, Minnesota Supervisor for Palomar.
Wade Jensen, Field Rep for Palomar.
Nick Sattler, Sales Rep, Farm
Dennis Beaver, Great American Insurance, Assistant Vice President, Alabama.
Corey Zimmerman, Claims Supervisor for North Dakota with Great American.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. Both Rich and Eric touched a lot of the updates that we'll be visiting with you all about when we schedule our meetings to revisit your crop insurance policies. The increased subsidies and the changes of the One Big Beautiful Bill are very favorable for crop insurance. So now is the time to get your meetings scheduled with us. We're looking forward to visiting with you. Any of the other agents have anything else they'd like to add? All right. Oh,
I call Eric 2 or 3 times a week, so I have clients call Reed, what's your guy telling us for the weather?
Well, those days, I'm not really sure. It's a constant lesson in failure. If you'd like to watch me fail daily, it's right up there.
awesome. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to join us this morning, and safe travels. We look forward to visiting with you soon.